Hello, everyone. Here for another edition of the Etiquette Show in Manhattan Neighborhood Network. And we have an amazing guest today, Mr. Sean Forbes, who is the chair of the California National Party. We want to introduce him, Mr. Forbes. Sean Forbes has a master's degree in political science from California State University, Long Beach. He lives and works in Long Beach, California, and Ojima, Japan, in the foothills of Mount Fuji. He's a published author of several books, a journalist, and the producer of several short films. So welcome, Mr. Forbes, to the show today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. So we're just going to sort of briefly outline of what we wanted to hopefully get the chance of talking about today. We definitely want to talk about the origins, a bit about the California National Party, its visions, platforms. We're particularly also interested in what I saw on your website was your proposal
Okay.
to make California, Oregon, and Washington State a sort of territory of Canada, and what's your sort of
Yes,
vision
in a very limited way. Yep.
oh, sorry, Mr. Forbes?
I was just going to say yes in a very limited, nuanced way, but yes, that's correct.
Awesome. And also, we wanted to talk about your sort of take on Trump's America today. Because
Sure.
so thanks for the show again. So, what was the sort of the origins of the California National Party?
Well, the party was started up in Northern California. It was started by three individuals, one who's still with us, Theo Slater, and it was a party that is to defend the California community. That was the idea behind it. How can we focus on California issues? And at the same time, too, the logical extent of how we do that is to make sure that we actually are independent from the federal government. So it started in 2015, and the idea is too much of our money is going out to red states, too much money is being spent in areas we don't like. And we want to make sure that, again, it comes back to California first. We respect the people in California. We respect them from the attacks of the Trump administration. And the only way we can really make sure we can finally protect the entire community is by being independent from the federal government.
So, when you focus, I know that I've seen that the California National Party has been described as a progressive and secessionist party. So, is it your
Mhm.
vision from being independent from the federal government, sovereignty within the United States, or a total separate country? And could you also comment on what I see on your website? It talks about the idea of making that sort of California a territory of Canada. Could you sort of elaborate a bit on those the alternative concepts?
Sure. So, I mean, when it comes down to it, what we want to do is that California should be independent. It should be sovereign. It should be outside the federal system. Now, do we have the door open to some kind of new constitutional arrangement with the federal government? Absolutely. Do we think it's going to happen? Absolutely not. But again, the door is open. We do want to have something to change. We are open to a constitutional arrangement to have something different. For example, California only has 2 senators for 40 million people. That's inappropriate. We don't really have enough representation in Congress. So again, that's inappropriate. If there is a change to the Constitution and also a change to make sure that things are done way differently in the Congress and also the entire government, we're open to some kind of negotiated settlement and actually working within the United States system, but we just don't see that happening. So what's going to happen is that we're going to have to be independent. So that's one. And then two, you mentioned again the Canadian petition. The reason why we brought that up is that Canada is under attack by the Trump administration, right? I mean, Trump is talking about annexing it. It is messing with them with the tariffs. It was going after them every which way it can, making up stories about fentanyl, whatever. We want to work with Canada, and we don't mind the idea that for a temporary period of stewardship or whatever you would call it, tutelage, whatever kind of good word for that, we would like to be under Canada for a little bit as a territory for just a 5-year period, just so we can settle all ways to make sure we're completely sovereign inside of the international community, basically be tutored by the Canadians and then take off after 5 years. Because we're 40 million people, we're also the fourth largest economy in the world. It's not really going to be it's not going to be a really good set of affairs to be with Canada when we have so many people and they have the same exact size and we're so much bigger economically. It wouldn't be a working relationship in the long term, but in the short term, we can definitely see that happen.
Awesome, awesome. So one of the questions that I have is that I haven't seen, we all know that California is, as far as democracy, is a great state for propositions, and I haven't been able to find any propositions which puts this to a test because I've seen polls, for example, that 20%
Mhm.
of Americans would be interested in being a province or a territory of Canada, but and it only takes, I believe, 8% of the population of California to support a ballot initiative, I believe. So, has there been any attempt for some sort of ballot initiative supportive of what you're trying to do?
There has been really no attempt. I mean, and right now, again, it comes into a legal question too, whether or not any court would allow for an open vote for us to suddenly join Canada. We'd have to break away some way before. The idea was that we're going to have some other kind of a solution to that if we wanted to go that direction. That's not actually something finalized. That's not something that we say like that's the way we're going to do things. But if we're going to go that direction, to actually have the Canadians help us out, work with them, especially again with their, themselves being under attack by the Trump administration, we're going to have something where we basically break before, and then we actually join Canada for a little bit to settle affairs, to make sure we can actually get up to speed as a sovereign nation. But that would be outside the current political system. I don't believe that can actually happen in any kind of court setting or anything like that. So that's the reason why you're not going to see a proposition for it, because the Supreme Court or any kind of other court lower down will never just say, okay, yeah, you guys have the right to vote to actually leave the United States. Because if we go back to the Supreme Court ruling Texas versus White, for example, it did actually say, right after the Civil War, that a state, with the consent of the states, can actually leave the Union. But that's big language. What does that mean? Does it mean that's a Senate vote? Does it mean just an up and down vote in the state itself? Does it mean the state legislatures have to get involved? Whatever it is, that's not very clear. They have to act in some sort of consent, and I don't believe that consent is going to happen anytime soon, especially in Trump's America.
With that in mind, we all know that the Declaration of Independence, for example, supports the rights of Americans to rebel if they feel that they're facing tyranny, the right to rebel and to change government in ways that support the mutual happiness of the people. To what extent, if any, is the California National Party inspired by the original words of the founders of the Declaration of Independence?
I think we're inspired by everything like that. I believe that the entire document is the closest thing we can have in human society to being a sacred document. I would just say, though, that again, we believe in nonviolence. We don't believe that there has to be, a revolutionary war or civil war to achieve those ends. But I do definitely believe that we can have non-cooperation. We can have a general strike in California to actually make that happen. So yes, the Declaration of Independence is a guiding light. It is important. It is a step forward in human history. I mean, the founding fathers, I always say that none of these people should be deified or sanctified or anything like that, because again, they're very flawed individuals between slave owners and these abuses of the indigenous tribes, etc. But that being said, they did represent an evolutionary step forward in human progress, and we do want to have the next step in human progress as well with our own independence.
In terms of what is your views when the Trump decided to, against the will of Governor Newsom and the mayor of Los Angeles, bring in all these, national guards and from, for into the to Los Angeles? Like, what is your views on that? And do you think that the whole act of Trump, putting one state's national guard against the unwilling host of another state, is that some sort of context or of some sort of civil war context which theoretically is about one state against the other? Like, what is your views on that? That whole sort of Trump pitting blue states against red states and that whole National Guard business going on in the Los Angeles.
It's a cold civil war. That's the only way you can put it. If you're actually pitting states against other states, if you're blaming all the issues of America on blue states instead of red states, if you don't recognize anything wrong with red states and always say the blue states are the wrong ones, that's a cold civil war. It's a civil war of propaganda, not by bullet. But that is what's happening right now. That is, again, the case. He wants to divide and conquer. He wants to whip up his MAGA cult. He wants to go after California because anyone who goes online for 2 seconds around any kind of MAGA circle will, be told multiple times that California is the epicenter of hell, that everything's going wrong in America is because of California in some way. And that California is a terrible place. You have to leave. Too many taxes. It's awful. Homeless. Everything's just rotten about it, which is a complete propaganda picture. And so, again, I think we're sick of being the punching bag of all these right wingers, I think that we need to be taken off because of the fact that they are, again, declared a cold civil war against us. Again, they're not using too much violence, but let's remember too, we have armed kidnapping gangs in the form of ICE. We do have fascist mobs. We do have, again, soldiers on the ground. So what else can we call it at this point? And this is, again, not a civil war because obviously there's not troop movements or anything like that. No one's, in open battle. But again, when you have a grandmother or father or, again, children being kidnapped off the streets by armed thugs that you don't support, when you have, state guard troops coming from or National Guard troops coming from other states, and they're, again, like they're acting on the whim of the president, who's always got the back of the Supreme Court. That Supreme Court will always set him up so they can always have victory in the legal system. I mean, again, this is an improper country right now. This is a place that is not working, and we need to get out. And that's our entire goal in the CMP.
So I've seen on the CMP website that part of its goals are healthcare, similar model to Canada. It's a sort of a progressive agenda. So can you sort of elaborate a bit on some of the critical points of your policy agenda and how you feel is going to revive California? Because as we know, there's been a lot of problems and malaise in California with respect to tent cities and San Francisco and Los Angeles. So how is the vision of the CNP and becoming sovereign from the federal government, how will that give yourself and your movement an opportunity of repairing California to making it once again a strong center of economic progress and that pursues the health and welfare and happiness of all Californians?
Well, I would say first, again, our problem isn't growth. Again, we're the fourth or fifth largest economy, depending on the metric. So growth is always here. Again, innovation is always here. Technology is always here. But the sharing of all that growth and wealth is not going anywhere. And that's the blame of the Democrats in Sacramento. They have to take some responsibility for that. Not everything can be put at Trump's doorstep. So one of our goals is to open up the political system in California. Right now, California is just under one kind of Chicago-style city hall. That's all it is right now. And yeah, city hall Chicago-style politics, it's a hell of a lot better than the Reich, but it's actually really not a good system either. And so we want to reform that. One of the things that I would do, and again, I'm just announcing my run for governor as well, is that I want to make sure that we rework the state constitution of California so that local regions have more control, akin to states, inside the state of California, so they can actually tackle these issues. Because it's really easy and flippant for me to say that, I know exactly what the answer is for everything. And I do have some ideas. But I know that local areas know exactly what's going on and what the best solution is. San Francisco will have a different solution than the counties next to Nevada, for example. But there's a way that we can have guidelines and directives to make sure that people are housed and healthcare is here. And when it comes to healthcare, at the same time too, again, Canadian system would be appropriate, but it might be something slightly different. There was a bill called CalCare that went through the legislature. Newsom vetoed it because he said it was too expensive. And guess what? Newsom was actually right about that. I have mixed feelings about that gentleman. Again, he does a lot of good things, not so good things. So again, he's in very much a gray zone when I think about him politically. But when it comes to Newsom saying that it's going to be too expensive, of course, yeah, it's going to be too expensive because we send $83 billion to red states who hate us. We send $83 billion to very strange Christian nationalist states. They're sucking away the wealth. That $83 billion can be used for a healthcare system in California. And I would make sure as governor to do everything possible to pull that plug and bring the money back to us. And again, this is not a radical idea. Newsom has threatened it, but again, Newsom, one of my issues with him, it's a lot of rhetoric, it's not a lot of action. He hasn't done anything to actually propose that. The governor of Maine, I forget her name, I think it's Janet Mills.
Yep.
She said that, again, she would do the same thing in Maine. And Maine is, again, much smaller economically compared to us. So we need to actually make that happen. Take the money back, then we can talk about healthcare, then we can get it fixed. So unless we do that, we get this, California is going to be in the same state it is. The California National Party isn't in the business of, let's go change the flag, let's call our governor president, and then just call it a day. We need to have massive reform here at home. And the Democrats in Sacramento are not doing us a lot of favors. So besides reworking the state constitution, have more local control, have basically states within the state, we would also make sure there's a guarantee to housing in the Constitution as a constitutional right, guaranteed to health care. At the same time, too, we are in the middle of a crisis, so I would expand the state guard, which, again, I want to be very clear, It is not the National Guard of California. There's the California State Guard. You can look it up. It's 900 unpaid volunteers. And I think those people should be expanded to as large a size as possible. And they should be the one monitoring and, using the network to go after ICE. Go after in the sense of, monitoring the activities, alerting communities of their presence, making sure that we can stop them short of violence. And again, that's the first thing the governor should do. It should be the governor office should be there to defend the people of California and the California community. And if we don't have that expanded state guard, I don't think any other party's talking about it. Again, what are we doing here? Are we just trying to reform things, or we actually want to change things for something better? And I think that, again, our party is in a unique position because I can say that we're the most radical party. We want to break away from the United States and make things happen. And we'll do any measure we can to make that actually come true. Mm-hmm. So besides those major points, I would also say as well, we do need to protect the artist community of California. And again, that's a lot of Hollywood, but it's also a lot of people outside Hollywood. And I want to adopt, just like they did in Ireland right now, a basic income for artists. Because every time you give $1 to an artist, or get actually in the Irish case, €1 to the artist, they get 1.48 euros back. Mm-hmm. So it's a good economic investment, especially in a state that has so much creativity. I mean, think of the music scene over the years, think of Hollywood over the years, independent movies, independent, graphic artists, whatever. Again, you put that money out, it's going to return to the nation state of California in quite a good investment. And I want to make sure that happens as well. So I would say that's the top 3 points.
With that in mind, we all know that the President Trump is contemplating further escalating things to bring in the Insurrection Act to continually move United States into an authoritarian system. It seems almost weekly or on a daily basis. Seems to be more and more Americans, and particularly Californians, who are yearning for the kind of policy and the type of democratization and decentralization that you're sort of talking about, but feel helpless without a sort of an operational context to try to bring about the bold vision that you're seeking. So for those Californians who are contemplating, yes, this is exactly the party that I would like to support, is there sort of any sort of contemplation of any sort of focus to bring about some type of electoral representational, even if it's a informal petition or poll that says that, okay, I as a California am going to in some of support some sort of petition, and then you're going to then tabulate it and say that, okay, we have polled and there are, let's say, 500,000 Californians who support us. Like, are you doing any sort of mechanism so that people who support you can get involved and express themselves as being supporting of what you're trying to do, so that you can have a mandate to then say to Mr. Newsom or Mr. Trump, we have all these supporters in California, this is what we want, or we're going to pursue our sovereignty agenda?
Well, again, there has already been sort of a mechanism that you speak about when it comes to a poll. Newsweek reported from the Independent California Institute, which is a think tank that we work with. That is, again, California National Party members put together that poll with YouGov. And this is back in June, July. So this is before the LA occupation, before a lot of these, National Guard kickoffs took place. 44% of Californians would vote tomorrow for secession. So already, again, 44%. That was Newsweek. You can look it up. Again, record poll for secession. And again, that's not a mandate, as obviously not. 44% is nowhere a majority, but that is a good starting point. And I would say right now, with everything that's happened, if there's another poll, it's got to be at least an even 50. But beyond that, when it comes to actually, making this a reality, I think that the governor needs to be the commander-in-chief of a general strike in California. And that's how we actually make sure this Insurrection Act and all this nonsense is put to bed. And again, for our own safety, I think we have to be independent after that point. But I believe that a governor who can set up with people in the legislature to back a strike, whichever way that's, calibrated, general strike, or maybe a strike with, again, longshoremen, the workers at the Port of Los Angeles, Port of Long Beach, where so many, all the goods and consumer goods from across the, the Pacific come into the United States. If we have that actually, kick off, and there's actually a governor in charge, and there's actually a budget to help out people, a strike budget that's actually set for the state, that's the way we can actually make something happen here. I think, again, we always hear about general strike, we're going to organize, no kings, etc., but there's never been really any kind of command about how to make that happen. I think people are afraid to actually try to take charge. So we actually have command over that. We actually have a budget with that because it's backed by the state of California, which, again, fourth largest economy. I think we can make something happen. That's the way we actually have a mechanism. And we already know, again, 4 out of 10 Californians are prepared to walk. And that was before a lot of nonsense.
Could you elaborate a bit in terms of the censorship, experiencing censorship, and to what extent that has subverted the dialogue that you think that needs to take place among the people of California, whether secession or other areas? Like, what can you elaborate on that? Because it seems to me that, yes, it's a very important topic. Censorship.
There actually has been censorship. Again, I feel that strongly. Again, when they had that poll about secession, the Newsweek reported, we reached out to Newsweek to talk about it because ICI, who they mentioned in the article, put together that poll with YouGov, right? No response. Nothing happened. Again, we don't exist. Politico, we had a reporter I actually talked to. Again, long conversation talking about CMP, the project, etc. They just wrote an article about a very goofy group that I don't even plan to, talk about too much further. But again, they are the ones who put together that petition you might have seen a while back where they're trying to get, an initiative for a vote for California independence. And the initiative went nowhere. That group was very goofy. Allegedly, the CEO, again, I don't think allegedly, he is a convicted felon. Again, it was a crypto scam kind of thing. So, Politico was more than happy to talk to them because they're the circus freaks of the side, right? That's what they're happy to talk to them. But we tried to talk to them, and we actually did promise, again, a fair interview about our issues and where we stand. Nothing again. And again, that's happened again. San Francisco Chronicle, I would actually blame them too. We've actually had discussions with them. All they did was take 2 pictures of one event and it really didn't go further. But then talked about that other group again because they're goofy, strange. Also, the former leader had, alleged Russian ties and nonsense like that, which again, we despise. We hope Ukraine wins and kicks the Russians all the way back to the Bering Straits. But that being said, again, there's been a lot of just we'll talk for a second and then we're not going to talk about it because I think somewhere along the line, if a Russian was kind of snooping around that other organization and thought that this could be a worth, I'm sure the federal government thought that this could be a problem, and I think that someone's leaning on someone else. And I have no proof of that whatsoever. I'm not going to say more insinuations other than it's odd. I also had the same kind of conversation with CNN. There was a podcast that I was on, interviewed for an hour or so. And again, talking about California independence, the whole point of the program was what if California left the union, right? What would happen? And I'm just down to basically 2 lines the entire podcast after 2 hours. So again, strange event. Can't say anything else about that.
Mm-hmm. So yes, I mean, it's definitely not good when you have a society which prides itself on freedom of the press, and at the same time you have the press self-censoring itself and self-censoring a critical dialogue that is needed that's a part of the democratic process. So that's kind of definitely extremely unfortunate. With that in mind, I'm just sort of curious as to if you've had any efforts, because we all know the United States was when there were founders of the United States which came together when during the American 13 colonies that came together to found the principles of the United States. Have you reached out to any sort of political or other groups to develop some sort of California vision based upon progressive and other elements that might share your interests? Has there been any sort of California Congress for Independence or anything of that nature?
Not inside the state, to be honest, but again, we've also talked to other groups who are progressive who want independence in other parts of the United States. For example, the New England Independence Campaign, also the Yankee National Party. Again, those groups, that's on the East Coast, that's Maine, again, New England, basically. They want to take off. We're willing to talk with those kind of people. We're not willing to talk to there's some wackos down in Texas who want to have a kind of a Christian Taliban state. We don't talk to those kind of people. We don't
Okay, yeah.
we don't appreciate anything like that. And we've also had talking. I mean, I've actually one of the fairest interviews and back and forth actually has been with the National in Scotland. Because again, our name, California National Party, just to give people just kind of a brief, background. CNP, California National Party, we base that on the Scottish National Party. Scottish National Party is the party of government of Scotland. They have MPs, again, like they're pushing for independence. They had the big referendum back in around the same time as we started, to be honest. I think that's how, again, everything kind of generated around 2014, 2015. So again, we've talked to them, again, talked to their paper of note. I mean, they don't own the paper, but again, they're we just put the writers are very sympathetic to their movement. We've also talked to Irving Welsh, the author of Train Spotting. He actually talked at our convention a couple of times. We've interviewed him. Again, he's very much, he's not SMP member per se, but he's in support of Scottish independence. So again, we've had these kind of conversations back and forth and kind of like, how to think out strategy, how to actually bring things about, what values do we actually care about? And, it all comes down to, for all these groups, is that, we want to protect our community. We want to protect the California community completely. And we have to do our best. Now, does it mean, like, again, constitutional arrangement? Sure, but again, the mega cult is going to hold all the brakes up. So there's no way that that will ever happen. I mean, we will try. We'll try to reason. We'll try again. But again, MAGA is completely out of the rational thought. So again, there's no way that's going to happen. Again, if they have enough seats, gerrymandered or not gerrymandered, or again, there's Senate seats in the South, or again, like typical red states, they'll block any kind of proposal for that. So again, we keep the door open, but they're going to keep, locking it every time. And so the only way we're going to get around that is that, honestly, we have to, especially in this day and age of, Trump attacks, we have to get out. Again, I think that's the only way we ensure the safety of, my community in California, is we need to get out. And, people talk all the time, like, well, is it constitutional? Is it going to lead to this or that? But, well, we're already in the middle of a cold civil war. That's, again, we're already having to defend ourselves, to a certain point. At the same time, too, when it comes to, like, we have to go to the Supreme Court to get a ruling, like, really, this Supreme Court we're going to get a ruling from, like, this very fair court that, again, is like, prepared to strike down part of the Voting Rights Act, this court that wants to, take a second look at gay marriage. Like, really, we're going to go hat in hand to that court and go, please, can you actually kind of like have some arrangement where we could have an honest vote about leaving? It's a joke. It's never going to happen. Same thing, too, again, if we want to, take off, and people are talking more about the, again, the constitutionalism of it, etc. Well, we're already in an unconstitutional society. Trump has made sure of that. Due process is out the window. He's doing tariffs. Tariffs I could not believe is constitutional. That's a tax on consumers, and he just can do whatever he wants at any moment. I mean, again, you brought up the Declaration of Independence. Well, what was the point? Taxation without representation. A single person calling the shots. That's, again, exactly what we're against right now.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I mean, there's definitely this drift to authoritarianism, which is frustrating the whole American constitutional ideals, and definitely your party is about supporting, from what I can see, the those ideals. But with respect to the challenges that you face, that would face, with respect to the proposition on California's, your sought desire for California to be autonomous, wouldn't it be potentially galvanizing for members who support the California National Party to at least have an opportunity of engaging in this Supreme Court, or engaging a proposition on California independence, to then say, okay, see, we tried, and this is what they did, rather than just saying that, okay, well, they're not good. There's no point in pursuing that, because they're just not going to listen to us. Like, I'm just thinking of playing devil's advocate as far as that.
Yeah, no, and again, like, just to be extra clear, again, we do have to go through those routes. You're absolutely right. I mean, again, like, it has to happen. Supreme Court, again, Congress, again, if we had a member of Congress of the CNP, if they go and make the case and they accept it, yeah, we have to try all these things. I mean, this is basically, again, to use another 1776 example, again, this is the olive branch petition, right? It's one last shot to say, hey, listen, can we please, can you work with us here just a little bit? So we have to go through all those routes. And again, no matter what, whatever, way it works out, if we're going to have independence for California, it definitely is going to have to be a vote of the people of California. That's obviously true. Again, So that, again, that would have to be like initiative or proposition, whatever we call it at that point, referendum.
In Canada, for example, we know that the Premier Daniel Smith, even though that the American media has been repressing, which is quite interesting, the American media repressing sort of what's happening with respect to cessation in the United States at the same time as, highlighting, Alberta's certain interests in Alberta who want to, quote, join the United States. And, it's kind of ironic. So, but at the same time, Daniel Smith has sort of supported the idea of, a referendum vote in Alberta on sovereignty. To what extent, if any, do you think that Gavin Newsom, even though we know that he wouldn't support this particularly autonomy, do you think, have you had any conversations with Governor Newsom, about at least endorsing the idea of some kind of proposition or vote, just to, not because he supports the idea of sovereignty, but just to give him an opportunity of dialogue, which is being repressed by the Trump's drift to authoritarianism? Do you think he would be supportive of just the idea that, okay, maybe even though I don't support sovereignty, let's have this vote and maybe that'll give me some political leverage against Trump? Do you think that Newsom might be supportive to something like that?
I don't think so. I mean, Newsom is supportive of his career. I mean, that's my biggest issue. Newsom is an opportunist. Again, before a lot of this was going off, remember he was on, Charlie Kirk, and it's like, oh, my son listens to your program. It's fantastic. And then him backing away from backing trans people, right? Again, he is wanting just to sit in the White House. And again, I think you'd be Obama 2.0. And I don't say that in a good way. I say that as a pejorative. It's going to be something where it seems like there's a charismatic individual involved. There's going to be real change in Congress. And it just doesn't happen. Yeah. And that's all he's going to do, is going to push for his, opportunity to take the throne for a moment. And yeah, again, Newsom as president versus Trump as president, I mean, there's no contest. I mean, I vote for Newsom in 2 seconds. Newsom is definitely better. But Newsom is a snake, and again, California is his nest, and he's willing to defend it to a certain extent. But let's be very clear here too. A lot of people are so excited about his tweets and like his, counter to Trump, which I find great and funny a lot of times. But let's just get down to it. It's tweets. It's rhetoric. He did sign in that law, the No Secret Police Act, but they haven't really fought the fact that the No Secret Police Act, the agency ICE, these, that brown shirt militia, they're not even paying attention to it. And he's not even enforcing it. He's not even causing hey, we need a clear-cut answer to this question. He's not actually, talking to county supervisors. He's not talking to sheriffs. He's not talking to anyone in state law enforcement saying, we're going to actually enforce this now. He's not doing it. He's not actually pressing the question. He basically said, oh, I signed into law. That was a good protest, right? I'll see you next weekend. And that's it. Again, he doesn't back up his actions. And that's the biggest problem with the Democrats. Actually, most of our platform program for the CMP is basically a lot of what Democrats have wanted for years. The problem is that the Democrats in Sacramento, and especially in Washington, D.C., much more so, is that they will just meet you one step, and that's it, and they'll take a break, and they really won't go forward with anything else. Because, again, remember, this is Chicago City Hall. This is a place where, again, it's patronage. It is, wasting money on God knows what. It is, they haven't been able to tackle anything from housing from San Francisco to Los Angeles. They're the only party in charge, so they don't have any kind of, real checks to actually make things happen. And we still see nothing happen. I mean, I drive down the road for my work every day, and I see just, all their failures going past me, between tent cities, homelessness, bad housing, sick people begging for funeral donations, whatever. Again, the poverty is there. And again, the Democrats were supposed to be, the party of the working class. They've been in charge for a long time. They've had every lever of government in the state. And it doesn't seem like it's getting that better. The only thing I would just give them is on a macro level, yes, the economy is growing in California. But like I said, it's growing. That's not the problem. This is, again, what are we getting out of it? We have the title fourth largest economy. We all pat ourselves on the back, but what does the working man get at the end?
Mm-hmm. What I guess the big frustration is that, that I guess, back in the 1960s, John F. Kennedy and his brother RFK, that vision of America where, you brought together the wealth and you made it America into the land of honey. I think that that was the great hope that many Americans aspire to. And I think that's quite frustrating that, for example, to many Americans, we have a society which seems to have, money for to destroy the world over and over through atomic warfare, to military infrastructure, and to other, infrastructural programs, but people who are left to rot on the street, left without health care, all this disenfranchisement taking place, politicians driving by tent cities and being completely disconnected, as if it is almost as if the people who are governing us were not even human. And because how could any human turn a blind eye to sick people and people on drugs that you could problems that you could easily rectify with a small fraction of the money that you're spending on nuclear armaments and various infrastructure. So it's like there's a complete disconnect of and a lack of empathy by the people who are sworn to defend the American Constitution, completely inconsistent with the idea of the pursuit of happiness for everyone.
No, it's absolutely true. I mean, I just, again, really clear cut example to me, that, one big, beautiful bullshit bill, excuse my language. Again, out in Inyo County, they only have 2 hospitals and one is being shut down. And that hospital, the operating budget to get back online is $3 million. Elon Musk spends more on cars or video games or whatever. He could, I mean, $3 million to him is like, basically a quarter of my pocket, if even that. So again, he could fix in 2 seconds. So again, we have all these billionaire oligarchs and again, people in charge with no morality who are just sociopathic hoarders of wealth at this point, and they won't even do anything. So again, like, you can make the argument, it's like, oh, if you tax too much of the rich, and then it's not going to flow into the economy well, and it'll cause economic disruption, whatever. I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying as an individual, as a man, if you had, again, like the wealth of Elon Musk, and you knew a hospital just needed $3 million, you just write the check in 2 seconds. You don't even have to question it. But again, we're just ruled by very bad people. I mean, Trump is at the top of the pyramid, but again, all the other oligarchs who run our lives are, again, they're the foundation base of the pyramid. And again, this is an ugly situation we're in. And again, I believe that, and this is one of the strongest things I would say about CMP is that, besides the other issues we're talking about, we want to have good, clean government back. We want to make sure that the corporations are not just flooding money and buying off these, these candidates, these, I don't know, whatever way to say it, these pimps in Congress that go around and try to sell this crap to the American people. That's all they're doing. And again, like our system's totally corroded. So like, even if Trump got out, whatever, we're still stuck with that because again, the Supreme Court has cut the legs from any kind of idea of like, campaign finance reform, whatever. Same thing is happening with Congress. Again, even if they're a Democrat, again, it's going to be the lukewarm result possible. So again, we have to really make sure that we have our values back. And I think California values are that, yeah, if you have money and you're part of a community, you should actually help out. You should actually do something here. Whether it's taxes or something else, you should actually be able to go forward and say, hey, listen, we'll take care of it because we're all in the same boat together, right? And right now, it's just that's not the kind of value that anyone has right now. That is just totally done away. And again, we either by taxation or other means, we need to make sure that people are taken care of because how could you drive down the road and to see all this and not let anything happen? Like Nancy Pelosi's been in Congress for God knows how long, and her district still can't solve housing. She's speaker twice or 3 times, whatever. I mean, again, she was there. She was at the the apex of political power. And she can't even fix things in her own district. So what's the point of her, doing anything at this point? Well, I think the point is that she made a lot of money, but that's neither here or there, I guess.
So with that in mind, we all know that Trump has, in his second term, has had this new sort of war on diversity with DEI and, war against LGBTQ communities, particularly transgender people. When during the last presidential election, did you think that Trump is going to be as anti this and fascistic as he? Do you expect him to be that way, or is he worse than you thought he was going to be? Because I think that many Americans who voted for him did not necessarily think that he was going to be like this. That he was going to be all this tariffs against Canada, da da da. all this tariffs of war against this whole MAGA movement. So what is your take on, what you were feeling in the 2017 election compared to how you feel now about Trump?
Well, I mean, when it comes to Trump, again, I always knew he was going to be doing a bad job. Again, I did kind of suspect it's because of his laziness and incompetence that he didn't really have a program, which I think was kind of true in the first term. He really was just kind of sputtering around for the most part. He got in, got a tax cut. That's all he wanted to do. He just wanted to have the championship belt, and I think he was okay there. And then what happened is that his malfeasance and his bad doings and all this started to catch up with him during the Biden administration, right? And I think that he basically went to bed with these basically a fascist mafia who want to really change things for the worse. And again, I think Trump is more of a figurehead than people realize. I think that all these people have these plans and they feed into his ugliness and it's already his reactive nature. And so they're the ones we have to watch out for more because, again, Trump's an old man. His health is kind of down the tubes, as we kind of seen, again, there's speculation one time that he died, his cankles, all this stuff that's happening with Trump. I think that really, again, he is much more of a puppet because, again, he's lazy, old, not that smart. But there is these other dangerous creatures in the background, like a Stephen Miller or Russell Vought, I think is his name.
Yeah, that's what
Project
that's what I also wanted to ask you about, is that there seems to be many people who are propping up this Trump almost like an antichrist figure, as if he is
Right.
the origin of all the evil, for lack of a better word, that comes out of his mouth. But what you're pointing to is that um, he could be just a simple figurehead for a whole lot of dark elements that are using his brand name to, Trump is simply marketing what all these dark elements want and are unseen, because I don't think it's coming from Pam Bondi. I don't think these are the people who are necessarily coming up with this policy. Is it a concern of yours that in fact um, Trump is just simply a figurehead that people are thinking, people are assuming that things are coming out of Trump, whereas he is just simply a figurehead of dark elements, including, for example, which I also wanted to get your take on, is Elon Musk and this artificial intelligence. Do you think that this whole, Trump sort of pouring billions of dollars in artificial intelligence, that we risk this sort of a futuristic environment where people become enslaved by an infrastructure, a military industrial infrastructure where humans are just simply a complete afterthought, that this tent city is just going to proliferate as humans become more marginalized in American society as a result of these dark elements, including the Musk group of artificial intelligence, which wants to create an artificial intelligence environment that controls what people do. Like, what's your take on that and the California National Party?
I mean, the view of the party is that, again, Trump is basically a symptom of a disease, right? He's basically the tumor that you see growing out of the skin, but the disease is embedded. It's the oligarchs. It's now, again, with a dystopian flair, again, it's the tech people, right? So again, he's representing all these dark interests. Again, especially going back to something we've always known, the military-industrial complex, et cetera. Again, he is just the culmination. He is the worst excesses of McCarthyism, the moral majority people from the 1980s. Again, a reaction to civil rights. I mean, I think that's, again, doesn't get talked about enough. Again, if you're going to try to take down the Voting Rights Act, Trump had the executive order that was rescinding Lyndon Johnson's executive order from 1964, I think. So again, this is a reactionary revolution. This is the counter revolution has come home. And again, they want to go further, again, like you said, with this kind of tech dystopia. And, as a person who reads up in history, again, the Industrial Revolution, which I think is what we're kind of going to a second stage of, the Industrial Revolution in Britain caused mass unemployment. It caused mass dislocation. You had people, farmers losing their land, being driven to the cities to work in factories for 16 hours a day, child labor. That was all because of the next evolution of technology. And that was a moral and political crisis for years in Britain. But Britain got away with it because, if you didn't fall into line, then we ship you to Australia or we hang you. Now, again, America, well, again, I don't know where we ship people to. Of course, we actually are shipping people to other countries right now as we speak. But America, will have two directions. One is either you're going to embrace a new collective consciousness, which means like universal basic income. Again, in Canada, for example, that is talked about a lot. Again, already Ireland has adopted one facet of UBI with the basic income for artists program. We've had pilot programs in our state, pilot programs across the country for UBI. It's always been a major success. That is the only reality we can have that's actually a positive one. We need to have something where, again, if you're going to replace people with AI, robots, et cetera, the people need to get a cut of that. They need to have a moral dividend sent back to them to actually live and actually maybe thrive actually at that point, because you're not doing a crappy job and you have other interests or something like that that might actually be a good outcome. But right now, the way our trajectory is right now, it is becoming more the dystopian thing. Like you said, people are trash, tent cities, massive poverty. You'll have a thin line of a middle class, which will basically be the tech people that support the machines. And you're going to have this, the oligarchs who want to live forever, like the Peter Thiels and the Musks and things like that. And, again, the poor will be just considered, excess. I mean, I don't know if you saw that interview with Peter Thiel where, they asked about like the future of humanity and he hesitated.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
the,
I saw that.
yeah, it's like that's not a normal response. I think that, it's kind of like, it's kind of like asking someone is child abuse bad, and
Mhm.
they have to wonder for a second. You know what I mean? It's a strange thing, and that's the people in charge. And he has way too much money. I mean, he's a smart guy, but I don't think he has any morality whatsoever. And the same thing with Musk. Though Musk, I think, is not a smart person. I think that was propaganda. But either way, again, like these are the people who are going to be running the nation unless we put a stop to it. And right now, I don't believe the United States will put a stop to it. California independent will put it dead in its tracks. But the rest of the USA, again, with a lot of these people who worship wealth and are scared of their own shadow and live in these red states, and they hate gays, hate trans, they butter about every minority on the planet they don't like. Again, those people are more than willing to live in that system. And I don't think there's any kind of reconciliation about it.
So, what is your message to the Californians in particular who are watching this program, who are diverse, whether they're Black, Latino, Chinese, Indian, Native American, LGBTQ? What is your message to them in terms of that you think is going to inspire them to want to support the cash, contact you and reach out to the California National Party and says that this is the party for me. I want to support this agenda and moving forward. What would be your message to them if you were speaking to them face to face?
I would just say that, again, we are one community. We're all neighbors. We all live here. We all work together. We're all mixed up together. And we need to make sure that we pull out every last stop to protect every individual. And if you're not talking about secession, if you're not talking about break away from the United States, you're not taking their concerns seriously because you're not willing to go the extra mile. And I think secession is the extra mile. That does need to happen to actually have an ability to protect every minority out there. Because if we're just going to keep trying to reform, play at the margins, try to have some good speakers in Congress. Well, I mean, Bernie Sanders has been doing this for 6 decades, right? And it's actually falling backwards. Executive order, Trump took that away. That was a Johnson order. Now they're, taking away, they already took away Roe versus Wade. They already took away again, they're now talking about, which again, I think is a signal they're going to take away the right for every state to have a gay marriage. So again, the only way we're going to protect everyone in the community who is a minority or who is, again, an outlier from the mainstream, whatever that would mean. Yeah, again, California is the place, is the community, it is the castle to make sure that we're actually protecting everyone. That's the only way we can do it.
Mhm. To what extent, if any, because I know you've talked about sort of your interest in common ground you have with Canadians and Canadian values and views, have you had any efforts to have any sort of collaborations or discussion with any group in Canada that you can publicly reveal that sort of further inspired you in terms of what you're trying to accomplish in California?
Well, I'll just put it this way. We've had some interesting contacts. I can't go into details
Hmm.
about that.
Hmm.
However, I would say that, again, from, again, Parliament, I believe it's Elizabeth May, the
Elizabeth May as
Greens.
Green Party leader,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, she talked about, again, actually accepting states into, Canada's system.
Hmm.
And again, I think that honestly, like, if we can't get ourselves up to speed fast enough, then I think that we should open up that dialogue for potentially, a Canadian, grouping. And our idea again is just, it has to be limited because again, it's unfair to Canadians. I mean, you got 40 million Californians, fourth largest economy. You try to mesh that with Canada, either way, it's going to be too much Californianized, and I don't think Canadians want to do that because, unlike Trump, I think that Californians respect Canada and like Canada and don't want to annex Canada and use it as one giant, resource field. So that being all said, I don't think it would be wrong, and this is something we're kind of just, trying to like broach the subject, I guess, or have a dialogue about. Is like, what would be wrong with us for, again, 5 years being a territory of Canada, so we can actually, build all the accoutrements of sovereignty, maybe join together with the Canadian healthcare system while building our own, try to work together on trade, because obviously we take off, there's going to be United States that will try to, punish the, us in some way. I'm not talking about violence. I'm just talking about, economics or just trying to mess with the program, whatever way. But if we can work together with the Canadians, have a 5-year period of territory status, and then we're finally fully sovereign, and then we work together as some kind of, I don't know what you call it. Again, not North American Union. I know that has conspiracy kind of like, uh, attachments to it, but like, something like a better version of the European Union where, Californians and Canadians can travel back and forth without like a visa, without a passport, kind of like again what the European Union was supposed to be, like a better version of the European Union. I think definitely that would be the best outcome for the future.
Uh-huh. And I know that it mentioned in your website, it refers to Washington State and Oregon. Are there equivalent organizations in those states that are supporting the same vision that you have in Oregon and Washington?
Yes, there is again like but their movement, just because of their own belief system, is much more decentralized. But the Cascadian movement,
Cascadia, I
the
know Cascadia,
yeah, and again the Cascadian, like again they do have, I guess, what you call like a political advocacy organization, the Department of Bioregionalism. I believe that's the name. Don't quote me on that. But again, like that's like kind of like their political org, as close as they get to being a political org, again, because of their belief system. But the Cascadians definitely, again, is probably the strongest of like, people from Oregon and Washington who want to take off. But I also, again, I would just say too that, again, I can't speak much more further about the Cascadians. And I definitely could hook you up with the contact if you want to talk to one of the Cascadian people. But I would just say that, if California were to take off, right, I have no doubt whatsoever that Oregon and Washington would fall right behind, because we're, again, we have much more in common than any kind of differences whatsoever. And I don't think the Oregon and Washington people want to be left in a rump United States under an increasing authoritarian takeover.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And just out of curiosity, has any members or representatives of the California National Party been to Ottawa or in order to discuss? Because I know that, for example, we hear that in Canada, the representatives of the separatist Alberta Republican Party, meeting Trump and stuff like that. So I was just wondering to what extent, if any, the California National Party has been to Ottawa or discussed their ideas with any sort of public way that you could disclose in Canada? Like, has there been any, have you have any interactions publicly with people in Canada in terms of represent or going to Ottawa? Just out of curiosity.
No, we haven't had anyone go. We'd love to go, to be honest. I mean, like, again, it would be great to have like, some sort of dialogue. I mean, like, the only thing we can say is that we did reach out, but didn't have a response from Elizabeth May. But that's been about it, and that's only because, again, of her comments about the states, etc. But no, we love to actually come out. We would love to actually talk to someone over there, because, I mean, I think that what was the last poll that taken in Canada said about now 50% of Canadians believe America's the enemy, something like that. And again, so again, like there has to be a fear again, like of annexation. And again, what would happen to the Canadian people? I mean, what they would just be, they wouldn't make Canada into a state. They would just turn it into a territory with a American governor, and God knows what happened to environmental regulations, healthcare. I mean, again, it'd be a nightmare scenario. I mean, again, Trump talks a lot, but it seems that again, like I said, he's more of a puppet. There's other people who might be preparing for something we wouldn't even understand at this point. I
Yeah,
mean, think about all the
I think Trump
well,
doesn't. Yeah, because I think Trump doesn't really want to make Canada a state. I think what he wants is he only wants Canadian resources. He wants Canada to become more like Puerto Rico, where
yeah,
Canada
exactly.
he controls everything. He only talks about statehood to kind of fool crazy people in Alberta. I
Mhm.
don't want to say people in Alberta are crazy, but what I mean is people in Alberta think that, oh yeah, we can become Americans and have the right to vote, da, da, da. But they're not going to give people in Alberta the right to vote. The people who do support that, they just want to become, Canadians to become a colony. Just like what we see going on with Trump in Ukraine, he just has a very transactional foreign policy where he wants to grab resources and not give people any rights. So if Trump does not respect the rights of American citizens, why should people in Canada who support in Alberta think that they're going to get any more rights than the type of disenfranchised experiences that yourself and other Americans are receiving? So, it's completely, wacko, but I definitely believe that, that if you had a delegation and brought it to Canada, then you would not be receiving the kind of censorship that you're pursuing in American media, because Canadian media would definitely be curious about what you have to say, and that by definition would get the American media interest in what you have to say as well, because they're not going to allow the CBC to talk about you if the Americans aren't covering you as well. So I definitely think that any direct interaction you have in Canada, if you're, and talking about your vision with Canadians, I think that that would be constructive to bringing together the kind of democratic discussions you're looking for. So do you
Well,
have,
no, absolutely. And again, I would love for anyone to hear that again too. And again, just to kind of just put this an emphasis mark on what you just said. Yeah, again, Canada will never be a state. It would be a territory. It'd be like Puerto Rico. It is a colony. This fake is taken over. Any Albertan or Canadian that thinks it would be a better deal with being an American citizen, that is, you're way out there. Again, you're out of left field. The rationale, the mentality is completely obtuse, silly, and is unbelievably stupid. Was just be blunt.
so with those words, I guess we have to end off the show there, and thank you, Mr. Forbes, for taking the time to come to our show and talk to you about your
Thank
very
you.
important initiative and party, the California National Party, and we wish it well and hope you start to generate the type of dialogue that is needed to bring California together and to move California in a positive direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you.